Hello, welcome to the Bigger Truth Show. I am Scott McMahon. This is episode 20. This is a impromptu kind of last minute thing that I'm doing. I only have about 20 minutes, so I'm going to get right into it. But this is going to be, I'm going to talk about these allegations here in Michigan of 115,000 voters voting multiple times for a total of 270,000 votes. And this is allegedly, I've been looking into this today, talking to some of the people involved, and it's it's pretty complicated, but I'm going to try to simplify it. And I don't see anywhere in the world a clear explanation of what's actually happened here, and I'm going to try to provide that. So, I'm going to first start with this. This is one of the first issues here is this Gateway Pundit thing about it. And I do not like Gateway Pundit. I have not been shy about that. I think that it is a propaganda rag and close to the Flynn Network. And I just they have a very bad track record, and I do not like them. So I'm not going to mince words there. And there's something about this. So um, I do not actually. This article is written by Patty McMurray, and it claims that it credits Tim Vetter and Fanny Montravaldi. I apologize if I'm messing up his name with this research, and yet, to my knowledge, it's not them that is responsible for this research, but it is primarily EIF, Election Integrity Force, and um, I don't have it written down, but it's Sandy Kiesel and Joanne, I think it is, or Joanna. And I apologize that I don't have your last name, Joanne or Joanna. But, but um, this and it, Pat Colbeck is out there trying to take credit for it, and this is kind of one of the things that the Flynn Network does is they grab a hold of an issue where there's a lot of energy. They they claim it as their own. They claim the issue or the cause is their own, and then they defame it. And you know, this showing up in the Gateway Pundit really makes it not credible because Gateway Pundit has peddled so much disinformation and misinformation over the last 4 years on election integrity that it's very hard to believe anything that they say. So, um, yeah, and uh, Laura Trump just said that this is not an issue, uh, according to Jen Mai, and thank you for sharing that. I'm still going to share this because I do believe that it is an issue, um, and I'm going to share why. And maybe this is something that the reason why she's saying that is because the Gateway Pundit got out there and defamed this and made it into not a credible thing. And Matt DePerno was also involved with EIF. He's working with EIF on this. Um, and he posted uh, this right here, this tweet on X, which is, um, it has almost 3 million views. And he says, after reviewing the qualified voter file of votes actually cast as of yesterday, October 29th, 2024, the database identifies 114,545 Michigan voters who have cast a total of 279,000 ballots from multiple addresses across the state. This results in 165,000 excess ballots as of 10/29/24. So, and below is one voter ID. So here is the list, and this is a list of votes from, and I do have this voter's name. I'm not going to publish the voter's name, but I do have I they all have all of these vote records. They all have voted here in on 10/25 from different addresses. These addresses include, and it's one voter name, and the middle column here, the fifth column over, it says voter ID, and they all have the same voter ID. And I've confirmed that they all have the same name. And so this is, this is a voter voting 21 voter voting 29 times in this election, according to the qualified voter file. And um, so these are just some of just from Google. These are some of the buildings that these votes came from. The addresses came from. You can see there include vacant commercial and mostly churches. So this is, this is concerning. When and back to this tweet is what he's saying here is that there are, and I've confirmed this, that there are 115,000 according to the QVF right now. There are 115,000 voters in Michigan who have cast multiple ballots. So an average of about two and a half, almost two and a half ballots apiece. Some of them, I think that this gentleman here in Detroit is the winner chicken dinner with 29, but there are several in the teens. There are many that have 2, the majority of them have 2, but there are multiple ballots for all of these voters, for 115,000 voters, according to the QVF. Now, the QVF changes very frequently, and they manipulate it in in ways that are very deceptive and without explanation and with with no transparency. And so it could be that in response to this coming out, that tomorrow it's magically very different, the qualified voter file. But what we need is an explanation from Jocelyn Benson. And Jocelyn Benson said this yesterday at a press conference about Dominion, which is it got a lot of attention.
Specifically yes. On Dominion. Why was that only caught in the past few days, and why can't it be fixed? I saw the release.
Yeah, this is a nationwide issue with Dominion voter access terminals in the counties that use them. And the voter access terminals, of course, not all the machines, just the ones that are accessible, have an issue with the straight party voting and a programming issue that's again affected the machines nationwide. And I think all of us that use Dominion machines were unhappy to learn about this during the testing period and as early voting began. So we're working with Dominion to seek accountability on that front.
Okay, it's funny that she says accountability, and that's one of Flynn's favorite words too, right? We need accountability. I'm not sure what accountability Jocelyn Benson would be seeking from Dominion, but that's kind of beside the point. My point in bringing this up is this is all just pure distraction. I've been saying all along very consistently that there is no fraud in the machines. It's not in Dominion. There are vulnerabilities, sure. There are things that we really need to shore up, and our laws really do not provide us with nearly enough transparency or protection. And we need voter ID for every voter. There's no the arguments from the Democrats against that are trash. They're trash arguments. They're racist arguments saying that black people are too dumb to be able to vote or to be able to provide ID. And it's trash arguments against the requiring voter ID. And there is we need voter ID for every voter. But the only way that we're going to get that is to get a Republican majority in the state House and the state Senate, because the Democrats clearly are loath to do so. Now, and it's the same thing with the voter record, the voter rolls. We need to clean up the voter rolls. We have 500,000 in Michigan. We have 500,000 more registered voters than we have adults. And that's garbage. That is just absolute garbage. And not 100% of adults, far from 100% of the votes, even want to be registered to vote. So they now in Michigan, if you go to the DMV or the Secretary of State to you can tell I'm from the West Coast originally, but if you go to the Secretary of State and to do anything, to change your address or get a driver's license, they automatically register you to vote whether you want to or not. But Jocelyn Benson has fought in court to keep dead people on the voter rolls, for example. And really, there's no good reason for that at all. I mean, that's just undermines her own credibility. But to this issue, and this is, what I believe is going on here is it's a sort of building of a line of credit it's accumulating a mass of votes before before election day, so that we don't see a spike like we saw in 2020. And so Jocelyn Benson is saying that we have 1.9 million voters that have voted, or 1.9 million voters that have voted. But the reality is it's actually like if you exclude these voters that have voted multiple times, you've got 1.65 million voters. Or if you give each one of these voters one vote each, as they should have, then you've got 1.7 million or so. So there's really about 1.7 million voters and votes, and Jocelyn Benson really needs to uh, go based off of that 1.7 number. And I see that what you're saying. I haven't looked into what Laura Trump is actually saying, but I think that this is an issue, and there needs to be an explanation. And just saying that it's a data glitch is not a adequate explanation. And um, I say, I really say shame on the Gateway Pundit and Patty McMurray and Tim Vetter and Pat Colbeck for trying to take credit for this and putting forward. The story just doesn't make any sense. As most of what's in the Gateway Pundit, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, it's very, very long, and lots of charts and lots of bold explanations, but it still does not make a lot of sense. And I think the simple thing is that I lost my page here. There we go. So here's that story, and it's super. It's very, very long, as you can see. um, and um, and it's just not clear. So it is actually pretty simple. I mean, there are 115,000 voters who, according to the qualified voter file currently, have voted multiple times. And so um you say, Jembai says, I hope the SOS can update the info. Absolutely. Um and explain it. Absolutely. And yeah, so that check my vote, that is Tim Vetter's thing, isn't it? I think that I'm not sure. Um you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's Tim Vetter's thing, and he does make money off of it. So I know that from what I was told, he used to work with EIF, Election Integrity Force, and then he left. He stole the data, and then he sells the data. him and Fanny. Yeah. So so they stole the data from Election Integrity Force, just like they're taking. This is kind of stolen valor. They're taking credit for the um what they're doing. And um yeah, Fanny is not a US citizen and cannot vote. I say Pat Colbeck, uh Fanny, Tim Vetter, they're not credible sources. The Gateway Pundit is not a credible source. And I am coming out here trying to be a credible source, saying that there appears to be some serious issues with the qualified voter file, and with voters who are voting multiple times. Now, the problem here in Detroit with this voter in particular, and others that are in Detroit, is that once the ballots are taken out of the envelope, and they're put through the tabulator, there's no going back. You can't find those ballots again. So, those ballots are already counted. So, we've got here, there's a few possible explanations. There could be 115,000 different voters that are committing voter fraud and voting multiple times. That's one possible explanation. Another explanation is that there is deliberate manipulation by the far left NGOs that Jocelyn Benson has granted access to the voter rolls. That is another possible explanation. Another possible explanation is Jocelyn Benson and her team are just completely incompetent, and they don't know how to manage a database. And it's a garbage database. and that would mean that she has no business in politics, which I believe is true. Um, so there's I don't know, maybe there's some other explanations, but if they come out and say, "Oh, well, it was a glitch," um, yeah, they're plaintiffs in the United Sovereign American lawsuit. Yeah, they're just not credible people. Um, talking about Tim Vetter and Fannie. So, there are explanations, and some are more plausible than others. And ultimately, um, I want to see what that explanation is. And I also believe strongly that we should be working off of the 1.7 million number, not the 1.9 million number. And I think that the RNC should really fight for that. And I also think that this is happening in other states. I've seen in Georgia, for example, there are even a week past the deadline to register to vote, the number of registered voters keeps climbing substantially. And we need an explanation for that, like a good one, not just, oh, well, we're getting caught up. There's 5 days now after the deadline for request an absentee ballot. The number of absentee voters is still increasing in Georgia by 300,000 a day, according to some information that I just saw on X. Um, and so maybe that's maybe that information is inaccurate. It looks like it was from their Secretary of State website. So, and it's the same kind of business, playing with the voter rolls to create um, votes, essentially, to create actual ballots uh, through either bad addresses that are mailed out. Uh, there's a huge issue here in Michigan, and I believe in other states as well, where a ballot that is an absentee ballot that is undeliverable ends up going back to the Secretary of State's uh, post office box. And there's no transparency, there's no controls, there's no oversight onto what happens with those ballots. They should be immediately destroyed. But there's no evidence that that's the case. There's no oversight. We can't audit it in any way. There's no paper trail. And all it would take is an algorithm just flipping some digits on known low propensity voters or even non-voters, um, getting them a mail-in ballot and then just having it go to the wrong address so that they never know, the voter never knows, and it ends up back at the Secretary of State's website, and then somehow mysteriously ends up in the hands of one of these far left NGOs that works with Jocelyn Benson and the Secretary of State. So, that I think that's a very plausible, very, very, very plausible scenario. And because there's no oversight, there's no transparency, and this is ultimately the danger of mail-in voting. I really don't believe that mail-in voting should happen. I think politically it's going to be difficult to unwind, but I think we need to, because we need to have security. We need to have, one possibility might be to do what they do in Oklahoma, where every single absentee ballot needs to be notarized. And in order to get a notary, you have to show your ID. And a notary public can only notarize up to 20 ballots. So they can't notarize more than 20 ballots, a single notary public, one person who's a notary. So those are some very common sense and sensible rules, and the people deal with it. And it's not that big of an inconvenience. And it assures that real people are actually voting. And that's what we need. So, unless there's any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and sign off right now. But I hope that this kind of brings a little bit of clarity to this. The bottom line is, this isn't all of the election integrity grifters and alarmists and propagandists are out there saying, see, this is definitely fraud. And I think it probably is. I really do. But I also believe that this is something that should motivate us to vote. And so, if anybody that is taking this and trying to make you feel hopeless based on this, they're a liar and they're a propagandist. We can be too big to rig, just like Trump says. We got to get out there and vote. Get everybody that you can to vote with you. We've got to vote, 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 vote. If you haven't voted early, do as long as you can. And once you if you haven't voted by election day, go and be prepared to stand in line all day if you need to. And there are people in other countries who have had to dip their finger into ink to mark that they voted, knowing full well that that ink on their finger could get them killed, and they voted. And so, to sacrifice a little bit of hunger or thirst to wait in line, make sure you bring a bottle of water. You know, be prepared to stand in line for 4 hours all day if you need to. Once you're in line, do not leave the line, no matter what. Um, so, we need to vote. We can overcome this. And that's really, I think, the most encouraging thing of this is that at most we're talking about 270,000 votes at this point. Is there going to be more? Yeah, there's going to be more, but I think we can outvote that. So there we go. Thank you all. Appreciate you, and just let's stay sane. Let's not jump onto whatever the most sensational and emotionally manipulative uh, talking points are. And there's going to be, just like Donald Trump Jr. said today, there's going to be, the next week is going to be full of psyops. And it's not just the next week, all the way through Inauguration Day is going to be full of psyops and disinformation and misinformation, try to discourage us and keep us from voting. And just vote. Just vote. That is the very best thing that we can do in our constitutional republic. So, appreciate you. And until tomorrow, we'll have another show.